My name's John Rendall. I'm an Australian. Been living outside of Australia for many, many years. Coming back every year, though. And last year, part of my life came back into, I suppose, public awareness when a clip from a film that I'd made in the early 70s with myself and a fellow Aussie reuniting with a lion cub we bought at Harrods in 1969. The footage of that reunion with him was put on YouTube, and today we've had over 100 million hits on that footage. So suddenly this little lion that I had all these years ago is being talked about, and I'm having the pleasure of remembering him and a wonderful animal he was, and travelling around talking about Christian and larger environmental issues. And this week I was invited up to the Gold Coast to come and talk about Christian and the work that I'm doing with the George Adamson Conservation Trust, which continues to raise money and continue George's work. First time I've been to the Gold Coast for rather a long time. I've noticed some incredible changes. What a beautiful place it is. I think Australians underestimate how beautiful their country is, and sometimes you have to travel away, you have to leave a place for some time to come back and realise that, you know, just how lucky you are. I was invited by Karen Phillips to come and be on the Early Risers programme at the Palazzo Versace. Now see, that's something that you wouldn't get in England. If you said you were having a breakfast programme or a meeting or a seminar or at 7 o'clock in the morning, you wouldn't get anyone to go. They just wouldn't be up, or they wouldn't get that together. Yet here we are at 7 o'clock. I was there at 6 o'clock in the morning doing a sound check, and there were already people there. They were having coffee in the Versace. They were glamorous, they were handsome, all dressed up, looking terrific. And that amused me. That made me think, hey, you know, this is a very different lifestyle. I will be looking around, and, well, as I have been, at some of the some of your wonderful local restaurants. And now that's something that has changed enormously in Australia. And in England, I know that I have friends over there who have restaurants, and they come out to Australia to headhunt Aussies, chefs, to go back to Europe, because this mixture of Asian and Australian or European food has now become, it's kind of worldwide interest in it. And Aussies have been doing it longer than most people. I think you're very lucky. I've seen a lot of restaurants here, and that are that mixture of European and Asian food. Very lucky. One of the things I always appreciate when I come back to Australia is this space. Big skies, big landscapes, obviously big seas looking out here. And when I first went to Europe, I was staggered by what people called a paddock there. There's what we would call a garden out here. And, it's just wonderful to come back here, and you don't get a sense of claustrophobia at all. Yes, in central cities there's always traffic, but it doesn't take long to get out. I'm thinking more of Sydney, that those extraordinary tunnels that they've put out to get out of Sydney. When I was a kid, it used to take 3 hours to drive down to Bowral, down on the Southern Highlands, which is a beautiful part of New South Wales. Well, now it's an hour and a half. You just whiz out there, and the same up towards Newcastle, coming up the coast. Those highways are fantastic. You can get out very, very quickly. Suddenly you're just surrounded by bush, and in England or anywhere in Europe, you have to drive a long, long way before you get out of suburbia, before you get out of very densely occupied parts of the country. And, I took Christian, the lion, back to Africa in 1970. We gave him to George Adamson, the man who'd rehabilitated Elsa, famous for Born Free. When I went to Africa, yes, it smelled differently. You realised this wasn't Australia, but there was something similar, something in common, and that was space. These beautiful landscapes, distant views, clearer skies, less light pollution. I mean, Europe there's light pollution. It's never dark. There's always lights from motorways or cities because they're so close together. Well, in Africa, you just don't have that. You get out into the bush and suddenly you can see the stars. And that's something in Australia too we have here. It's something I love when I'm out in the country here. You can actually look up and see stars, identify them. And people in Australia seem to know what they are. In Europe, no one knows which is Venus and which is, you know, which are the galaxies. They just don't know because they can't see them. How can you possibly learn about these things if you can't see them? So Australia, for me, that's one of the things I always enjoy coming back, is just to look at the space here. Wilderness spaces are becoming more and more important in the world because those spaces, they are the lungs of the world. And if we lose these wilderness spaces, and by wilderness space I don't mean just a desert, it can be you know, the rainforest in Brazil. In a way, that's a wilderness space because, you know, it's not full of cities. People live there, animals live there, which they can in wilderness spaces, but it's not overcrowded, it's not overpolluted. And these areas are becoming more and more important in the world. And interesting, Australia, which has been, you know, many thought of as you know, a wasteland. If you look at the centre of it, you know, you can't grow crops there. If you do, it's by irrigation, and that causes its own problems. But just the fact that it is an empty space is very relevant to world climate. So I see that as an advantage, that we're all going to have to hang on the edge. It'd be terrible to think of Australia. I mean, Broken Hill at 5 million people, wouldn't that be a horrible thought? You could never support it anyhow, to be such an artificially supported a city, and God knows what damage that would do to the environment with, you know, with generating the heat or the you know, or the air conditioners or something. You know, that would be terrible. So I think Australia is it's a very lucky country, and I think we're dealing pretty well with our environmental issues. Obviously, they're hugely controversial at the moment with the Rudd government and Mr Abbott with his points of views, and the fact that Malcolm Turnbull virtually, what he did, he had to resign as party leader over an environmental issue. Now, we haven't come up with a solution. By listening to these people, these politicians, I haven't heard a solution that I find workable. But the very fact they're talking about it is an incredible change and great progress. And of course, it was the failure of the Copenhagen conference was, you know, that was pretty. It was a bit embarrassing, really. But it was an international convention where we had some of the most powerful, all the most powerful people in the world there. Even Obama went there. They didn't get a result, but it is on the agenda, and everyone is talking about it. And one of the outcomes of this revived interest in Christian is that I have the opportunity to talk to groups of people about environmental issues, coming at it from a less academic point of view, which, you know, it's you know, we don't need all these facts and figures and these doom factors kind of being forced on. It's a bit depressing. But when, like I did at Early Risers, you start out and you see the footage of that wonderful lion running down to meet us, you've got people's attention, and they can see that here that human beings and animals, wild animals, exotic animals, can have a relationship, can coexist in the same world, and that we have to if we're all going to survive. And those animals are integral to our survival because they look after the environment in their own way. One of the things I'm looking forward to is spending more time back here in Australia is going to places I've missed out on by living abroad. Now, when I come back, there are places that I just really appreciate and long to go and see. One of them is Taronga Zoo, because that is an extraordinary facility that has become one of the great zoos of the world. And of course, zoo now is such an outdated word because the traditional zoo can't exist anymore. The idea of animals in small cages being looked at by human beings as exotics is no longer acceptable. If you take very young children to a zoo and they see a bear in a small cage, they would shout and cry and complain to their parents, and the parents would complain to the zoo, and, you know, that's incredible progress. So Taronga now has really become, it's a research station, it's a basis for breeding endangered species, and of the cages and facilities there, I mean, they're hardly not cages. The recent ones they've just built for these Asian elephants that they saved from up from the streets in Bangkok. I mean, that cost $5 million just so that they would have an environment where these elephants would be comfortable and you could view them in comfort and not feel, my God, these animals are being, are being constricted unpleasantly. And in fact, they're not, because they've already had a calf, so that's pretty impressive. And so much of the larger animals have moved up to Dubbo, to the Western Plains Zoo. Now, if you can't afford to go to Africa, I'd go to Dubbo. It's wonderful. You go on safari in Dubbo, and you can have the opportunity to experience what it would be like in Africa by going up there. And another fun thing they do at Taronga is called Roar and Snore, where you go and stay at the zoo overnight. You go after the zoo closes, you have you see them put the animals to bed, you then have a classical, traditional, round the campfire safari supper, you then go and sleep in a tent amongst all the animals, and there you are all night, and you hear things roaring and snoring and snuffling and things, and get up early in the morning and go around and let the animals out and feed them. Now that's a fantastic opportunity. So Taronga is something I recommend to anyone who comes to Sydney, to Australia. I'm thinking of Sydney specifically because that's what I do know better. I do want to come up and see the Australian Zoo up here, and we have been talking about me coming up and doing some lectures up there, and I look forward to that on a future occasion. I was up at Port Douglas 2 years ago. I took my sons up there, and that was a wonderful experience to go up there. And we went out to out in through the cane fields to see Diane Cilento's theatre up there, which I thought was just what a wonderful thing. Diane, cheers to you for doing that. Diane used to live next to me when I lived in Wiltshire in England, and so to go out and see her theatre out in the middle of cane fields was fantastic. What an extraordinary, adventurous and imaginative thing to do, and to ask people to drive out through the cane fields to go to a theatre. When I'm in Sydney, of course, it's the harbour that is just, it really is possibly, I think, the greatest harbour in the world, and you see those ferries coming and going, the people, the start of the Sydney Hobart yacht race, when you see people out there with wonderful, luxurious, great boats following it, and then you see someone on a surf ski paddling it, and how they don't get run over, I don't know, but that's wonderful. And we've got friends with a house at Palm Beach, which is terrific. Last Sunday I was there, we saw the great swim. 1,000 people swam from Palm Beach round to Whale Beach. Fantastic. And some guy did 33 minutes. Well, it was just astounding. So, and I was there with English friends who were, they just couldn't believe it. People see 1,000 people swimming out into the sea, and to see all these healthy people, and not always just kids too. There was an over 50 section. They got there. Just very impressive. That one of the wonderful things about Australia, and I'm very conscious of it here over just the few days I've been here, that if you ask people where something is or what they should do, everyone's got an opinion. They're very friendly. They've got the time. Oh, if you're here, you should go and see that. You should go and see that koala park or the Birdwood, or you should swim there. And very friendly, and that's great, because I think there's a pace of life here that allows people to appreciate where they are. And in London, if you ask someone where something is, they just, oh no, I haven't got time. It's down there, and they might even give you the wrong directions. But here someone might actually even walk you around here and say, oh no, you'll get lost. Go around here. So that's terrific, and I'm looking forward to coming back in December and spending a bit more time here. And I'll definitely get up to that Australian Zoo.